So today I'm going to be in the studio because it's probably in the teens, getting into single and maybe below 0 digits here today in Maryland as we cool off. So I'm going to be working on this photo reference. I have my handy dandy box. Sorry, I'm not very good at this yet. Box of pastels here. It's all kind of a mess. One thing that I really like to use when I'm working is a wax pencil. You could call them China marker pencils, wax pencil. You can find them on Amazon. This particular kind, instead of peeling off the annoying paper like this one is you just twist it and it gets taller. So what's nice about these is that if you're beginning and you're trying to look for big shapes and you have a photo that has a glossy finish on it, you can take it and kind of draw some of your shapes on it for you if you're looking to kind of figure out what shapes you want to make. And then you can just wipe it off with your finger. So if you're a beginner and you're trying to look for big shapes and not be so honed in on the details in the earlier stages of your painting, you can use this as a tool to kind of break down your photo for you. Obviously, if you have a piece of paper that is just a sheet of paper, it will stay there. So make sure you're using something with a glossy finish, or get like a clear page protector, and you can then use a regular sheet of paper if you'd like. So I am working on black Lacarte paper. Sennelier Lacarte is my absolute favorite paper. It has a really nice texture to it. Not that you can feel the texture from here, but it has a really nice texture to it. It comes in some really beautiful finishes, and it's just my favorite surface to be working on. So I'm going to set this here. And what I like about using the wax pencil on this surface is that anything that you draw underneath can be covered up with your pastel afterwards. So sometimes if you use a stick of charcoal, let's say, and you do an underdrawing and you go to lay a light color on top, they might intermingle and make kind of a sloppy, muddy looking color. That doesn't really happen with the wax pencil, which is a nice feature. Now when I start a painting, I kind of just make a general map for myself. I'm not getting into all the nitty-gritty details. I'm just making a very basic outline of what I'm trying to achieve in the painting. And I don't really necessarily follow rules about colors or what goes first or second. I think it's very important that you work the whole painting at the same time. So don't leave sections unfinished and really focus and hone in on other sections, because in the end, I think it doesn't look like a cohesive piece. It tends to look like you missed a spot, or you didn't feel like doing something that you were avoiding, possibly. And this is going to be a quick demo, so I'm just going to do a very basic composition here. So I'm looking at my photo. I kind of like that horizon line. We have kind of some reddish trees coming this way. There's kind of a little bit of a road that's coming down here. And then we get to kind of the meat and potatoes of some of the curves of these lines of corn. Now you'll see I'm not making everything, as in I'm not going to put all of my information in this first pass that I'm doing. I know that I want some taller stalks of corn in here and a few over here. So I'm just kind of roughing in some areas that I know I want. So I don't know if you can quite see that, but it gives you a general idea of what I'm looking to do. Now when I look at this photo, what I'm looking for are warm, cool contrasts and light and shadow areas. And sometimes I break it down to something as simple as having the corn stalks, let's say, the cornstalk, a color for the cornstalk in shadow, and a color for the cornstalk in light. That helps you kind of determine where the light is touching and what information is important to include. So when I'm looking at this photo, I know that I want some cornstalk and light color coming through here. And I definitely want some down here. There's some kind of coming this way. And then there's quite a bit back here. And a little bit here. Now you'll see I'm making just very rough gestural type marks using the skinny side of the pastel. There are times when I want to use a fatter pastel or an even fatter pastel. Now these are Diane Townsend Tirage or Tirage, however you say it. These are Terry Ludwig. He's a great pastel maker. Now these are great for nice broad marks. They would pretty much resemble, you know, a 1.5 inch bright brush if you were painting. So the same kind of concept there. So I know up at this top area, the sun is hitting everything up here. So I really want this to be a nice, bright, warm color. Now everything that you commit to in pastel, it's very forgiving. You can go back and change your mind. It typically works a little bit better if you are using go a little bit darker than you want to, so that you can lighten it up if you need to. That's a little bit easier than trying to remove some of the light to get a dark back on top, if that makes sense. So I'm just going to go through here and kind of map some things out that I want going on. And then in this foreground area, what's really exciting about what's going on in this is that there are some really beautiful lights that are traveling, lights and shadows that are traveling across this front area. So we're gonna go ahead and carve some of those out with our pastel. And I'm being pretty loose and gestural about how I'm choosing to do it. I want that snow, like kind of a light purple color up here at the top, because it's a cool item, the snow, as in color, aside from it being fun to play in and such. But when the light hits it really warms up quite a bit. And in this area, even though you can see in the photo, even though in the foreground there are areas of light, they're not anywhere near as warm as what's happening back here. So I'm gonna wanna make sure that I keep my lights in this section still rather cool. I don't want this area to get too warm, because for the most part, most of it is kind of sitting in shadow. Now you'll see some of the areas where I use that wax pencil, I'm now just generally covering, and it covers quite nicely. Now I'm going to go in with a little bit of a darker color here to kind of carve in some of the shapes of the field that are happening. And like I said, I'm not too concerned about accuracy and making sure that everything is reading perfectly. What's important to me is just kind of getting the gist of what I'm trying to do here. technique that can be kind of helpful is to kind of, I guess, be the equivalent of, in painting, to scumble. So in some of these shadow areas, I've already laid down a very green blue, so I'm going to go back in with a very purple blue and kind of just lightly in the shadow areas, kind of up the contrast and put a little bit of that cooler blue in there. And I think it makes the whole, the color harmony a little bit richer, but it also gives you the feel of it being quite cold, which is nice. Now in the foreground area, there are some highlights going on in these areas, and I'm gonna just put a couple in right around and sometimes also the negative spaces can be equally interesting to what's going on in some of the positive spaces. So I'm not always necessarily looking for a positive thing to draw, something physically to add, but I'm looking to carve in some of the background negative shapes into what's in the foreground. Now, kind of a cool thing happening in the background, these trees kind of get warm where the light is starting to touch them at the top. So I'm gonna integrate some of that into there. And I think I want the baseline of these to kind of be a little bit darker. So I'm just gonna add a little bit of darkness in there too. If you can bear with me a second while I put some of these marks in. It can be a challenge for me to talk and paint at the same time because I'm not super used to it. Now, one thing that's really cool that's going on with these is that wherever the light is hitting these corn stalks, they're kind of glowing like a really nice warm color. And I want that to happen in my painting because it's kind of giving you the impression that anywhere where the light is touching, it's kind of highlighting the corn stalks that are happening in the foreground. So in these areas in here, I want to kind of integrate some of that. And I'm only doing it in the areas where the light is coming through. I don't want to put it in the shadow spots unless there are just like a couple of little faint highlights in here. You want it to read as being believable that the light is touching the areas that you're accentuating here. And on the tops, I want them to really kind of glow. So I'm going to put a little bit of a warmer. And I'm going to go back in too because I kind of wouldn't mind having a little bit of more like a magenta kind of tone in there. In some of this. And the ones in the foreground that I want to be kind of sticking up and be a little bit larger than some of the other ones, I'm going to darken those up a little bit. So I want some areas of depth in here too with a darker kind of color. And I'm just kind of generally telling the viewer that there's some stalks in here. I'm not giving them every single stalk. I'm not focusing on every single detail of what's happening. For me, I think part of the fun is allowing the viewer to participate in that and letting them kind of fill in the gaps themselves with their own experiences and their own things that it reminds them of when you're painting. I also tend to kind of make some more hash marky kind of marks. I just want a little bit of warmth integrated back in here. I want these things to kind of stay balanced. So I'm looking for a color, and maybe I just do it in my head. Maybe there's a reason for doing it, but I just want to kind of balance some of what I've got going on here just to make sure that it's working and reading nicely. So I am going to go ahead and lighten up some of these areas with a more kind of true white, just to kind of indicate that there is some snow on the ground in here. There are some areas where it kind of would just accentuate so that you could understand that we're looking at kind of a snowy scene here. And this is my first time making a video like this, so be nice. I'm a little awkward, so bear with me while I try and figure this out. If anybody has interest in continuing watching, I'll do my best. Now, I do a lot of plein air work also, and it's my preference, mostly because the subject matter is pretty limitless. You can go outside and find things pretty much anywhere that are interesting enough to paint. And I do, and I feel like the place where I live, a little more of a rural area, has a lot of opportunities for me to find exciting things to paint. So if you haven't done any plein air work, I highly recommend that you go outside and paint from life. If you like being in the studio and you're not very comfortable outside, that's fine too. But painting from life, even in the studio, is going to help you become a better painter for sure. Some of these areas in here, I want this to kind of get a little bit darker. And so for right now, and since this is kind of a demo, just to kind of quickly show you what I find to be important information about painting. Right now, if I was painting this, I would probably pause for a little bit and kind of let this sit in my brain for a while before I really made any other decisions about it. Somebody asked me, how do you know when you're finished a painting? And for me personally, it's when the painting stops getting better. So what I like to say is when it stops getting better, just pause for a minute, think about it, think about what you're trying to achieve in the painting. So for right now, I'll let this sit a bit. And this is just kind of a rough study on how I like to work, what kind of marks I like to make, kind of the process, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks so much.